Tori, there were new jobs numbers that came out at the end of last week, and they astounded everybody. People were speculating that we might even have job losses in January. What happened?
So on the surface, the January jobs report was huge. Expectations were pretty pessimistic, largely due to the Omicron surge and its impact on employment as people were staying home because they got sick. Everybody got sick. The consensus estimate among economists was around 150 to 200,000 new jobs created in January. But the spread was really wide. There were some economists that were expecting to see jobs tick down a little bit. And instead, the economy created a seasonally adjusted 470,000 new jobs, according to the government's survey of employers. The unemployment rate ticked up a notch to 4%, but that's because labor force participation rate rose. So that's a good thing. So yeah, it was a pretty bullish jobs report on the surface. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that leads me to say, what happened below the surface? So what do you think? What are the takeaways, the trends? Tori and then Steve.
Well, I don't want to take talking points away from Steve, but I think the key to the report is, the data was reported on a seasonally adjusted basis. And one of the things that I think many economists in the BLS have been struggling with during COVID are the seasonal adjustment factors. Steve can probably talk more about this, but in general, the labor market, just like the economy, experiences some cyclicality throughout the year. For example, in the summertime, employment falls in the education field as teachers are not in the classroom because school is closed for the summer months. And in the wintertime, retailers hire extra temporary workers to deal with the holiday crush. And then, of course, they let those workers go in January. And those patterns are not exactly playing out the way we're used to in COVID. Steve?
Let's go over to Steve here.
Yeah. So as Tori says, the job numbers, there actually are two surveys. There's an employer survey that counts jobs. So individuals who might have two employers could be counted twice. There's also a household survey where they survey individuals. And so they ask people, are you employed? And they might have multiple jobs, but they only count them once as a person being employed. So you get some differences between the surveys. But there also is this issue of seasonality, as Tori referenced. And the perfect example for the past month was employers hire workers to deal with the Christmas holidays. And so employment goes up in December, and then after the holidays, they let the employees go, so employment goes down. And so, interestingly, the unadjusted numbers, in other words, the actual count of employees from December to January actually fell by 2.8 million. Now, none of the stories in the press focused on the fact that the unadjusted numbers, which is the raw data, employment fell from December to January. What they did focus on was to say, well, the employment in December was high because of the Christmas seasonal employment. And so we're going to adjust the number down. And we know that, January employment is low because all those employees, were let go. So employment is down. So they adjust the numbers. And so the adjusted numbers showed the increase that Tori referenced, the 470,000. But the unadjusted numbers were actually down by 2.8 million. And, you look historically, and that's the pattern that you see from December to January of all the previous years. They've been in the range of, 2 to 3 million jobs, and then they adjust that away due to seasonality. Now, the question is the seasonality patterns different due to COVID? In other words, was the hiring somehow different by different industries, by different employers? And then those who were let go, as Tori said, everybody was expecting a drop in employment, and there in fact was an adjusted increase. And now the issue is the adjustments are done on a statistical basis. So they take historical data and they look at what the historical swings are, and they apply those factors from the past to the present. And that, of course, is the big question: is the present like the past? Does COVID affect the ability to correctly adjust for the seasonality factors? And the real reason this all matters, of course, is that the Federal Reserve is looking at the labor market, and they're saying, is the labor market really tight? Because a tight labor market will add to inflationary pressures. And the Fed is saying, well, we're going to end quantitative easing over the next month, and we're going to start raising interest rates. And they're making those decisions based on, in part, the labor market data. And if they think the labor market is really tight and they go ahead and raise interest rates, and it turns out the labor market wasn't as tight as they thought because the seasonal factors were different than they thought, they may have to backtrack. Or, most likely, though, they're going to wait and look for next month's data, and not, you shouldn't pin too much on 1 month's data,
Right.
regardless of which data you're looking at. You want to look at the